The voicemail plays in real time. My brother's voice has that forced, casual tone, the one he uses with clients, not family. He's asking if I know anyone in media consulting or digital strategy because his firm has a client retention situation. The way he says situation, like it's in air quotes. I'm in my actual office when this plays. Floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown skyline, mid-afternoon light across the glass desk I bought 6 months ago. I hold the phone away from my ear, watching the timestamp tick forward. 3 of our anchor clients are talking about brand realignment or some shit. Anyway, if you know anyone in the ED, podcasting space or whatever, send them my way. I know it's not really your thing, but you might know somebody. The or whatever. The not really your thing. I don't call back. I forward the voicemail to myself. Subject line, evidence. I save it in the folder I started 8 years ago, labeled for later. This is number 44. This occurred 60 days following my podcast launch. I was 26. I inhabited their converted garage space, and I had completed my 4th recording that same morning. The garage conversion had previously housed 2 vehicles, visible structural supports, heating unit that clattered whenever the motor engaged. My recording equipment occupied the corner, concealed behind thermal blankets suspended from adjustable rods for acoustic treatment. The blankets were navy. They retained the odor of the rental storage facility they'd originated from. The primary residence embodied California suburban architecture, cultivated lawn, matching luxury sedans in the drive, homeowners association mandated neutral exterior in a shade, designated desert taupe. My mother had begun referring to the garage as your creative space approximately 3 weeks post-move. Her inflection on creative space translated to transitional arrangement pending actual direction. She never termed it an apartment. She never acknowledged it as my residence. She labeled it the creative space as though it represented a temporary condition. The Sunday meal occurred in October. 6 individuals at the table, my parents, myself, my brother, already 24 months into his analyst role at the investment company, my sister, completing her graduate business degree at an institution my father characterized as elite at minimum once. Per discussion, my grandmother, maternal side, who typically remained quiet during these gatherings but observed everything. The dining area was ceremonial. Dark wood table, overhead fixture with adjustable lighting. My mother calibrated based on atmosphere, fabric napkins. She pressed every Saturday. Sunday dinner represented a custom she'd established during our adolescence. The expectation was universal attendance for local family members. The genuine expectation was attendance, full stop. My father delayed until following the first course to present the document. He'd creased it in thirds. He flattened it beside his plate. His precise language, I simply want you to consider trajectory. Your brother's company is discussing advancing him to associate level. Your sister has employment proposals from 3 advisory firms. And He abandoned the sentence incomplete. My mother occupied the void. Recording yourself speaking in the garage. The table fell silent. My sister concentrated intensely on her salad. My brother glanced toward me, then elsewhere. I clarified, once more, that the project was audio content analyzing media industry dynamics, that I was cultivating an audience, that the revenue model requires time because sponsor interest demands listener volume, and listener volume demands consistent output before audiences develop loyalty sufficient for recurring support. My father's reply, but at what point does this transform into a business? Currently, it's a pastime with recording equipment. He delivered this gently, as though attempting to illuminate reality. This constitutes dismissive family systems methodology. They pose at what point questions implying the response is never. They frame your work as temporary, transitional, activity performed until readiness for authentic existence. The question isn't sincere inquiry, it's assessment. They've determined you're adrift, and each conversation becomes corrective intervention. The question isn't, at what point will this become a business? The question is, at what point will you acknowledge this? Isn't functioning and conform to our expectations? My brother attempted assistance. His interpretation of assistance. Have you considered leveraging the podcast as qualification material? Meaning, use it to secure employment at an established media organization? Demonstrate your industry comprehension? I informed him that wasn't the objective. He inquired what the objective was. I stated I intended to construct the media organization. My sister laughed. Not maliciously, involuntarily. The sound produced when someone articulates something implausible. She recognized it instantly, contacted my arm. Apologies, I just mean, that's exceptionally difficult. Most audio ventures fail. I'm attempting to be grounded. My grandmother spoke initially since seating. What revenue have you generated? The table quieted again. I disclosed $63 from supporter platform. Previous month. The figure landed like testimony in proceedings. My father exhaled audibly through his nose. That particular sound signaling disappointment masked as restraint. My mother touched his hand. The gesture communicated, discontinue this. I'd witnessed that gesture throughout my existence. Dinner progressed. We discussed my sister's approaching interviews. We discussed my brother's involvement in client presentations. We discussed whether my parents should restructure their mortgage. No one posed another question regarding the podcast. I did not weep. I did not depart prematurely. I simply completed my portion, assisted with clearing, and crossed the driveway to the garage. That evening, I recorded content examining undervalued markets, regarding the disconnect between expert forecasts and actual outcomes, regarding the danger of dismissing emerging patterns because they contradict established frameworks. I did not reference my family. I did not reference the document, but I preserved it. I initiated a digital collection on my computer. Future reference. I didn't comprehend what future signified yet. 18 months into production, I maintained 12,000 listeners. Corporate underwriting, regional financial institution compensating $800 monthly for 60-second preliminary advertisement. And I'd established a limited liability company, completed documentation independently, covered the $200 filing expense from production revenue. I hadn't informed my family. Thanksgiving, my parents' residence, 20 attendees. Extended relatives, my father's siblings, distant relations I encountered annually. The dining table had been expanded with supplementary sections. My mother had secured additional seating. My uncle, my father's younger sibling, pharmaceutical representative, exceptionally skilled at interpersonal communication, inquired regarding my current activities. I stated I operated a media enterprise. He requested clarification. I explained the audio content framework, audience cultivation, underwriting revenue, speaking engagements beginning to materialize. I'd received invitations to participate on 2 discussion panels at a regional marketing conference in January. He acknowledged politely, said, "That's excellent, that's excellent." Then he redirected to my cousin and inquired about her new finance position. Subsequently, my father approached me in the kitchen. He held documentation. He'd printed a comparison spreadsheet. This was characteristic. He generated spreadsheets for all matters, retirement calculations, vacation expenditure projections, home renovation cost-benefit evaluations. He displayed this one: compensation comparisons, graduate business program median salaries, entry-level marketing roles at major corporations, media company starting compensation. He'd extracted data from employment review platforms. His finger traced downward, indicating each figure. This represents what your sister will earn next year. This represents what your brother earned last year. This represents what you could be earning had you pursued business school, as we discussed. I inquired why he'd created this spreadsheet. He appeared genuinely confused by the question. Because I want you to comprehend what you're forfeiting. I did not elevate my voice. I did not remove the spreadsheet from his grasp. I simply stated, I'm not forfeiting it. I'm constructing it. He observed me. He didn't comprehend the metaphor. He refolded the spreadsheet, placed it in his pocket, touched my shoulder. I simply want you to possess security. That's the entirety of this concern. Oh, when your achievement doesn't align with their measurement systems, families don't revise the measurement systems. They determine you're failing to comprehend the measurement systems. My father wasn't exercising cruelty with that spreadsheet. Within his framework, he was supplying data, evidence-based concern. The difficulty was his evidence exclusively incorporated traditional employment. He possessed no classification for what I was constructing. Therefore, in his spreadsheet, my income registered as 0. Not because I wasn't generating revenue, by then I was clearing $2,400 monthly, but because he never inquired. He never requested to examine my business account. He never asked whether the podcast was self-sustaining. He simply presumed the response was negative and constructed his spreadsheet accordingly. The pattern manifested in minor, persistent iterations. Weekly communications from my mother inquiring whether I'd contemplated business school, not immediately, but eventually, simply to possess the credential. Professional networking messages from my uncle's recruitment director. Noticed you're in media. We have an opening in organizational communications. I could advance your application. Directly. My sister transmitting employment postings. Subject headers reading, just informing you, and thought this might interest you. And once, notably, this appears. Aligned with your interests. All entry-level roles. All presuming I was initiating from zero. Coffee meeting with my brother in March, year 3. A cafe in the city center, his selection. He was between client appointments. He requested espresso, verified his device twice before beverages arrived. He inquired whether I'd contemplated a 5-year strategy. I stated I maintained one. He asked whether I'd documented it in proper business plan format, the type investors require. I informed him I didn't require investors. He regarded me as though I'd claimed I didn't require respiration. Everyone requires investors. That's how you expand. That's how you progress from minor operations to genuinely constructing something. I inquired how much he believed I required to expand. He lacked a response. He simply stated, I'm attempting to help you conceptualize larger scale. I didn't inform him I'd already engaged my first contractor. Part-time editor, 15 hours weekly, managing post-production. I didn't inform him I'd secured my third corporate underwriter. I didn't inform him I'd just registered an operating name for advisory services under the LLC. I simply stated I value that. We completed our beverages. He returned to his appointment. I returned to my workspace. The garage conversion he continued believing was temporary. 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in April. Kitchen table. The compact one in the garage conversion, not the ceremonial dining table at my parents' residence. Computer screen illumination, sole light source. Government registration site confirming documentation. Business designation, Aperture Media, LLC. I selected Aperture because it signified opening. The quantity of illumination you permit. The method you regulate exposure. I appreciated the metaphor. Separate business banking at a financial institution distinct from my parents' institution. Separate email domain, aperturemedia.co, not my personal account. Business identification cards I designed independently. Printed at commercial location, funded with production revenue. I disclosed to no one, not concealment from embarrassment, strategic silence. I'd learned they didn't pose genuine questions. If I stated I executed corporate underwriting agreements, they'd interpret I'm selling advertisements and envision classified spam. If I stated I'm launching advisory services, they'd interpret I'm performing freelance work and inquire when I'd secure stable employment. Therefore, I ceased clarifying. The second underwriter executed in May. Specialized advisory firm concentrating on brand positioning. They desired access to my audience composition. Professional women, 28 to 45, employed in media, marketing, or creative strategy. They compensated $1,200 monthly for mid-content underwriting and quarterly sponsored detailed episode. Third underwriter in July, software organization developing project coordination tools for creative teams. They'd located the podcast through professional networking. The chief executive had consumed my content examining undervalued markets. He desired me to interview him regarding product development. I didn't charge for the interview. I charged for the promotional campaign surrounding it. Monthly recurring revenue reached $4,100. I remained in the garage conversion, but now I was compensating my parents' rent, $500 monthly. I'd insisted. My mother attempted to decline it. Said I was family, said the garage had been vacant regardless, said she didn't want me experiencing obligation to compensate. I insisted. She accepted the payment, then purchased groceries with it. Positioned them in the apartment refrigerator, premium produce, the expensive coffee I preferred, prepared poultry. I did not explain that this undermined the principle. Christmas Eve, year 3, family custom, Everyone opened one gift before midnight, my mother's regulation. Something regarding making Christmas morning less chaotic, though genuinely because she enjoyed observing us open. Presents and Christmas morning was excessively rushed. We were in the living area, 12 individuals this year, immediate family plus my mother's sister and her spouse, my grandmother. The tree stood 7 feet, white illumination exclusively, ornaments my mother had accumulated over 30 years. My brother handed me an envelope. He was smiling, satisfied. The smile he employed when he'd finalized a transaction at work. Inside, 3 printed employment postings: technology company, marketing manager, media startup, operations coordinator, entertainment industry talent agency assistant role. Each posting contained handwritten annotations in the margins. Blue ink, his penmanship. Interviewed here, positive environment adjacent to the technology company. Know someone in recruitment adjacent to the startup. Could be beneficial stepping stone adjacent to the agency. His precise language. I realize you're pursuing the podcast project, but I simply want you to possess options. These are all media adjacent. You could probably utilize your podcast experience to secure employment. I believe you'd excel at any of these. I inquired whether he believed I required employment. He stated, I simply believe you need to be grounded. You're 28. Most individuals have initiated retirement savings by now. Mom and Dad won't articulate it, but I know they're concerned. My mother began to object. We're not concerned, we simply want... My father didn't articulate anything. My brother persisted. This was his intervention. He'd been strategizing it. I appreciate that you're passionate about this, but passion doesn't sustain bills long term. And eventually, you're going to desire to purchase property, establish family, possess stability. This isn't about abandoning the podcast. It's about providing yourself a foundation so you can maintain it as secondary activity without the financial strain. I did not interrupt. I permitted him to complete. He was still smiling. He believed he was assisting. Then I inquired, did you bring these tonight on Christmas Eve because you believed I'd be more inclined to agree? Before everyone, his expression transformed. The smile disappeared. That's not appropriate. I stated, then why not transmit them in a message? Why make this a family moment? Silence in the living area. My sister was observing the floor. My mother's hand was on my father's arm. My brother stated, I just thought, I don't know. I thought perhaps you'd want to discuss it. That perhaps having everyone present would make you feel supported. My sister attempted to de-escalate. I believe he's just attempting to assist. I examined the postings again. Assistant, coordinator, manager, all entry level. All presuming I was initiating my career, not 3 years into constructing a business projected to gross $55,000 this year. I refolded the documents, positioned them back in the envelope, returned it to him. I value that you care, but I'm not seeking employment. I possess a business. And if you'd inquired about it, genuinely inquired, not simply presumed, you'd know that. My grandmother, from her chair near the fireplace. What's the business valued at? Everyone regarded her. I stated, this year, approximately $55,000 in revenue. Next year, I'm projecting 78. My father spoke initially, projecting based on what? I stated, based on executed agreements, based on audience expansion rate over the previous 18 months, based on 3 corporate underwriters and an advisory pipeline I initiated constructing in April. He observed me. My mother stated, you have agreements? I stated yes. My brother stated, why didn't you inform us? I regarded him, at the envelope in his hand, at the employment postings he'd printed and annotated and brought to Christmas Eve, because he believed I required rescue. Because every time I attempt to inform you what I'm constructing, you instruct me to secure legitimate employment. I departed before midnight, drove back to the garage conversion. 32 degrees externally, heater rattling, Christmas illumination on the primary residence visible through the window. I seated myself at the kitchen table and drafted my first official advisory services proposal. If they believed I required legitimate employment, I'd construct a legitimate business they couldn't dismiss. But I still wouldn't inform them, not because I was concealing, because I'd learned that documentation only matters to individuals willing to examine it. And they weren't examining. There's no right answer. I'm still figuring out what mine was. The garage apartment is empty now. My parents converted it back to storage. My father parks his BMW there. But I kept one thing before they cleared it out. The foam acoustic panels I'd hung on those walls. They're in my office now, mounted behind my desk. When clients comment on them, impressed by the setup, the attention to audio quality, I tell them they're from my first studio. I don't say it was a garage. I don't say my mother did laundry 10 feet away while I interviewed Fortune 500 executives. I don't say I recorded there for 6 years while my family asked when I was getting a real job. I just say first studio. They nod, impressed by the continuity, the origin story. They don't know those panels heard 8 years of Sunday dinners where no one asked the right questions. I do. My brother called me 6 months after that Christmas dinner, asked if I'd meet him for coffee. I said yes. We met at a place near his office, glass walls, espresso machine loud enough to cover awkward silences. He ordered first, black coffee, no sugar. I ordered the same. We sat by the window. He stated, "I've been thinking about what you said." I did not respond immediately. I waited. He continued, "About legitimate employment, about the agreements you have." I stated, "Okay." He pulled out his phone, scrolled to something, turned the screen toward me. It was my podcast, episode 47. Guest was a VP from a company his firm consults for. He stated, "I didn't know you'd interviewed him." I stated, "You never asked who I interviewed." He regarded the screen. Then me. "I listened to it. The whole thing. You were professional. He respected you." I stated, "He signed a 12-month sponsorship the week after that aired." My brother set his phone down. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stated. "I tried, multiple times. You kept handing me job listings." He was quiet. Then, "I thought I was helping." I stated, "I know you did." That was the truth. He wasn't malicious. He genuinely believed employment at his firm was rescue, that my business was desperation disguised as ambition. He stated, "Dad still thinks—" I interrupted. "I know what Dad thinks. I'm not interested in changing his mind anymore." My brother nodded slowly. "Mom asks about you." I stated, "She knows where I live." He stated, "She wants you at Easter." I regarded him. At the coffee he hadn't touched. At the way his tie was knotted, perfect, identical to our father's. I stated, "I'll consider it." I did not attend Easter. The business crossed 6 figures the following quarter. I hired my first full-time employee in June, a producer who'd been freelancing for 18 months, someone who understood what it meant to build something before anyone believed it was real. I moved out of the garage apartment in August, signed a lease on a 2-bedroom with actual insulation, office in the second room, acoustic panels on every wall. My landlord asked if I was a musician. I stated, "Podcaster." He nodded like he understood. He didn't, but he cashed the check. My parents learned I'd moved when my grandmother mentioned it at Thanksgiving. My mother called, asked why I hadn't told them. I stated, "I did tell you, last April. You said the garage was perfectly adequate." She stated she didn't recall that conversation. I stated I did. She asked for my new address. I provided it. She stated, "We should visit." I stated, "That would be fine." They never visited. The advisory business expanded faster than the podcast. Corporations wanted to understand how I'd built an audience without traditional media infrastructure. They wanted to replicate the model. I charged them $6,500 per consultation initially, raised it to $12,000 within 9 months. No one questioned the rate. They paid for documentation. For strategy frameworks I'd developed in that garage while my family ate pot roast and wondered when I'd interview at their friend's firm. I presented those frameworks in boardrooms with views of the city, wore the same clothes I'd worn recording in 32-degree temperatures. No one knew the difference. My father sent an email in December. Subject line, "Catching up." Body text asked if I was available for coffee. I responded, "My schedule is available on my website. Book through the contact form." He did not book. My mother called instead, asked why I was making this difficult. I stated, "I'm not making anything difficult. I operate a business. Business communications occur through business channels." She stated, "You're punishing us." I stated, "I'm maintaining boundaries." She stated she didn't understand. I stated, "I know." That was the last conversation for 7 months. The foam panels are still behind my desk. Clients comment frequently. They assume they're decorative. Aesthetic choice. They don't recognize them as evidence, as proof that documentation only matters when someone's willing to examine it. I learned that at 23, in a garage apartment. While my family printed job listings and presumed I needed rescue, I wasn't drowning, I was constructing. They just never asked what I was building. By the time they looked, the foundation was already poured. February marked year 3. The advisory business required incorporation. I hired a tax attorney my parents' friends would have recognized from the partner listings they'd shown me. She reviewed my quarterly filings, stated, "Your revenue trajectory is unusual." I asked what she meant. She stated, "Most consultants plateau around year 2. You're accelerating." I stated, "I documented what worked." She nodded. "Billed me $4,000. I paid it same day." The podcast crossed 2 million downloads that spring. Sponsorship offers arrived daily. Software companies, productivity tools, mattress brands desperate for authentic integration. I declined everything that required script approval, accepted only direct read sponsorships where I controlled the language, charged $22,000 per episode, booked 6 months out. My mother learned the numbers from a cousin who worked in media sales. She called. First contact since December. Asked if the figures were accurate. I stated they were. She stated, "That's more than your father made his first decade as an attorney." I stated, "Yes." She stated, "Why? Didn't you tell us it had gotten this big?" I stated, "I sent you the milestone emails. Every quarter. You have them in your inbox." She stated she must have missed them. I stated nothing. She asked if I was angry. I stated, "No, I'm just busy." She stated, "Too busy for family?" I stated, "Too busy for people who need revenue figures before they return emails." She hung up. My father reached out separately, wanted to discuss estate planning, said I should consider structuring assets appropriately given my income level. I stated I already had estate planning. He asked who'd handled it. I stated, "The attorney you recommended 3 years ago. The one whose card you gave me at that dinner. She's been excellent." He stated he was glad I'd followed through. I stated I followed through on everything. You just weren't watching. He stated that wasn't fair. I stated, "You're right, it's not fair, but it's documented." He asked what I meant. I stated, "Every email I sent about the podcast, every update you marked as read but never responded to, every milestone you acknowledged with 'sounds interesting' before changing the subject. I have the thread history, timestamps, read receipts, all of it." He stated I was being vindictive. I stated, "I'm being precise. There's a difference." June brought the invitation. Industry conference. They wanted me keynoting. 45-minute slot. Topic: Building authority without institutional backing. Fee: $35,000 plus travel. I accepted. The conference was in my hometown. Same convention center where my parents had attended legal conferences for 20 years. I didn't mention it to them. Didn't send an invitation. Listed my emergency contact as my landlord. The event coordinator asked if I had family in the area who might attend. I stated I did not. She looked confused. I clarified, "I have relatives here. I don't have family." They found out anyway. The conference program ran in the local business journal. My name, my photo, my company listed as a featured sponsor. My mother called the day the issue published. Asked why I hadn't told them I'd be presenting. I stated, "You didn't ask what conferences I had scheduled." She stated she would have asked if I'd mentioned I was coming to town. I stated, "I'm not coming to town. I'm fulfilling a speaking contract. The location is incidental." She stated she'd like to attend. I stated tickets were sold out. She stated surely I could arrange something. I stated, "I have 0 complimentary passes and 0 interest in requesting special accommodations." She stated I was being deliberately hurtful. I stated, "I'm being deliberately professional. This is a work event, not a reconciliation opportunity." The keynote went exactly as prepared. 45 minutes, 378 attendees, standing ovation. The content was identical to what I'd been teaching in that garage. The only difference was the stage and the check. And the fact that every person in that room had paid $800 to hear what my parents could have learned for free if they'd answered a single email in 2019. I saw them in the lobby afterward. They'd bought tickets from a reseller, paid $1,400 each. My mother's face when she approached told me everything. She'd heard the podcast download numbers. The consulting rates, the corporate client list I'd referenced in the presentation. She stated, "We had no idea it was this significant." I stated, "Yes, you did. You had the emails. You chose not to know." My father stated they'd been busy. I stated, "So was I. I was busy building this. While you were busy printing job applications I never requested." He stated they'd only wanted to help. I stated, "You wanted to fix something that wasn't broken. There's a difference." My mother asked if we could talk. Really talk. I checked my schedule, stated, "I have a consultation call in 20 minutes, then a flight at 6. I'm available for exactly 8 minutes if you walk with me to the car." She stated that wasn't enough time. I stated, "It's 8 minutes more than you gave my business plan in 2019. We walked. She talked, said they'd been scared, said they hadn't understood, said the consulting world seemed unstable, said they'd wanted security for me. I stopped at the town car, stated, "You wanted familiarity. Security would have meant trusting my research, my projections, my track record of meeting every goal I set. You chose comfort over evidence." My father stated they were proud now. I stated, "Now that there's a price tag you recognize, now that Harvard Business Review quoted me, now that the numbers look like what you consider legitimate, but the work was exactly as valuable when I was doing it for $50 an hour in 2019. The only thing that changed was your willingness to see it." My mother asked what we could do. I stated, "Nothing. There's nothing to do. I don't need your validation anymore. I didn't need it then, but I wanted it. I don't even want it now." She stated that was cruel. I stated, "No. Cruel was telling a 34-year-old woman with 2 degrees and a profitable business model that she needed to apply for administrative positions. Cruel was hiring a career coach to fix something you never tried to understand. This is just honesty. I've moved on." My father stated I was holding a grudge. I stated, "I'm holding a boundary. I spent 5 years trying to make you see what I was building. You spent 5 years trying to make me quit. I won. You lost the opportunity to be part of it. That's not a grudge. That's a consequence." The car pulled away. I took the call, closed a 6-figure contract before we reached the airport. They sent flowers to my office the next week. The card stated, "We're sorry we didn't understand sooner." I donated them to a nursing home. Didn't respond. 3 months later, my mother showed up at a workshop I was running in Chicago, bought a ticket under her maiden name, sat in the back row. I saw her halfway through the session, didn't acknowledge it, taught the full curriculum, took questions. She didn't raise her hand. She waited until everyone left, approached the stage, stated she'd listened to every podcast episode, read every article, understood now what I'd been trying to build. I stated, "Good. I'm glad the content helped you." She stated she wanted to be involved, wanted to support the business. I stated, "The business doesn't need support. It's running at full capacity with a 14-month wait list." She stated she meant emotionally, wanted to repair things. I stated I don't have the bandwidth. I have 3 keynotes next month, 2 product launches in Q4, and a team of 8 people who depend on my focus. I spent my 30s begging for your attention. I'm spending my 40s building something that doesn't require it. She asked if I'd ever forgive them. I stated, "I don't know. Forgiveness isn't the goal. The goal is running a company that changes how people approach career transitions. Whether you're part of my personal life doesn't affect that mission." She left. I packed my materials, flew home. That was 14 months ago. I haven't spoken to them since. The business is projecting $8 million this year. We're expanding into executive coaching, launching a certification program. I've been approached about a book deal. The same publishers my mother used to say would never take a chance on unproven methodology. I don't think about them often. When I do, it's not with anger, it's with clarity. They weren't equipped to see what I was building because they were measuring it against a world that no longer exists. They wanted safety. I wanted impact. Those are different currencies. I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm not holding space for reconciliation. I'm simply doing the work they told me wasn't viable. And every contract I sign, every client transformation I witness, every standing ovation I receive, none of it is vindication. It's just proof I was right to trust myself when no one else would. If you've ever had to defend your vision to people who should have believed in you first, you're not alone. Drop a comment. Let me know your age, where you're watching from, and what you built despite the doubt. I read every single one. Here's what I learned about surviving family dismissal. They will not apologize on your timeline. They might not apologize at all. Waiting for that moment keeps you tethered to their narrative. I stopped waiting the day I signed my first six-figure contract. Not because the money proved anything, because I realized I'd built the proof for myself, not for them. Document everything. I kept every rejection email from the corporate roles they pushed me toward. Every screenshot of early revenue, every client testimonial, not to wave in their faces later, to remind myself on the hard days that the data supported my instincts. When doubt crept in, and it did, even after the business took off, I had receipts that I wasn't delusional. Your worth is not negotiable. The moment my mother showed up in Chicago, part of me wanted to collapse. To say, finally you see me. I didn't. Because the version of me she wanted to support wasn't the one who'd survived the isolation. It was the successful one, the palatable one, the one whose bank statements made her look good at dinner parties. I didn't build this company to become someone they could brag about. I built it to prove I could trust my own judgment when theirs failed me. Boundaries are not punishments. When I told my mother I didn't have bandwidth for reconciliation, I meant it. Not as cruelty, as fact. I'd spent a decade pouring energy into trying to make them understand. That energy now goes into my team, my clients, the people who bet on me when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Choosing where your attention flows isn't selfish. It's survival. The validation you're seeking exists in the work itself. Every time a client tells me they left a toxic job because of something I taught, every time someone implements my framework and sees results, that's the win. Not my parents sitting in the audience, not my father admitting he was wrong. The work validates itself. I just had to stop looking for external permission to believe that. I still think about the dinner sometimes. The country club. The way they both leaned back in their chairs like I was pitching a pyramid scheme. The exact phrase my father used. When you're ready to be serious. I don't think about it with rage anymore. I think about it the way you think about old weather. Something that happened, that you survived, that doesn't dictate the forecast. The certification program launches in 6 weeks. We've had 400 applications for 60 spots. The book proposal went to auction last month. 3 publishers. The one my mother used to cite as unreachable offered the highest advance. I took a different one, not out of spite, because their vision for the book aligned with mine. That's the shift. I stopped making decisions in reaction to them. I started making them in service of the mission. I don't know if they follow the business. I don't check. My assistant has instructions to filter any outreach that comes through official channels. Not because I'm angry, because I've built a structure that protects my focus. They taught me, accidentally, that the people closest to you can be the least equipped to see your potential. I learned to find believers elsewhere, my team, my clients. The strangers who send messages saying the podcast got them through a career crisis. That's the family I chose, the one built on shared vision, not shared blood. If you've had to prove yourself to people who should have been your first believers, you already know the validation comes later than you want it to. Sometimes it doesn't come at all, and somehow you keep building anyway, because the work itself becomes the answer. You're not alone in this. Tell me in the comments. What did you build when they said you couldn't? I didn't plan to end up on the panel. The industry conference, annual, invitation only, the kind my father used to attend when I was in high school. I was scheduled to give a breakout session on retention strategies. 30-minute slot, mid-afternoon, nothing major. Then the keynote speaker canceled. Food poisoning. They needed someone who could speak to leadership development, organizational culture, the intersection of profit and people. My assistant forwarded the email. Subject line, emergency ask, can you step in? I said yes before I thought about who might be in the audience. The green room smelled like coffee and panic. The conference organizer kept apologizing, saying they'd understand if I needed notes, if I wanted to shorten it. I told her I didn't need notes. I'd been teaching this content for 3 years. I knew it the way you know your own name. Walking onto that stage, main hall, 800 seats, the kind of venue my parents said I'd never be credible enough. To fill, I scanned the crowd out of habit. 3rd row, left side, my father, alone. No my mother, no entourage. Just him, tablet in his lap, the same expression he used to wear in board meetings. Neutral, assessing.
Waiting to be impressed.
I didn't freeze. I didn't adjust my talk. I delivered the keynote exactly as I'd have delivered it to a room of strangers. 45 minutes. Case studies. Data. The framework that's now cited in 3 academic journals. I talked about the cost of dismissing unconventional talent. The ROI of betting on people before their resume justifies it. I didn't mention my own story. I didn't need to. The content did the work. The applause was long, professional, the kind you get when you've delivered value, not just inspiration. I stayed for the Q&A, answered 12 questions, gave my contact information for follow-up, walked off stage into the corridor where speakers exit. He was waiting there, not backstage, not forcing entry, just standing near the exit, hands in his pockets, the same navy suit he wore to every professional event. He looked older, thinner, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep. He said my name, not hey or excuse me, just my name the way you say it when you're trying to communicate that you know you don't have the right to more. I stopped walking, didn't move toward him, didn't move away. He said, "That was excellent work." I said, "Thank you." He said, "I mean it." The retention model, the part about quarterly diagnostic interviews instead of annual reviews, we should have implemented that years ago. I didn't ask who we was. I knew he still consulted for 2 firms. I knew because the industry is smaller than people think. I said, "It's in the book, comes out in April." He nodded, looked at his shoes, looked back up. He said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. He said, "I didn't see it, what you were building. I saw risk and I saw my own fear projected onto your choices. That dinner, the things I said, I was wrong. I could have asked if my mother felt the same. I could have asked why it took 3 years and a keynote for him to show up. I could have listed every moment he missed, every milestone he dismissed. I didn't. I said, "I appreciate you saying that." He looked like he wanted more. A hug. Forgiveness. An invitation to coffee, to catch up, to explain himself in longer form. I didn't offer it. I said, "I have a flight to catch." He said, "Of course, if you ever want to talk, I'm available." I said, "I'll keep that in mind." I didn't keep it in mind. I got on the plane. I briefed my team on the 3 consulting inquiries that came in during the Q&A. I moved forward. Here's what nobody tells you about vindication. It doesn't feel like a finish line. It feels like weather passing. He apologized. It mattered and it didn't. It didn't undo the years. It didn't change the fact that I built this without him. And maybe that's the point. I don't need his approval anymore because I stopped waiting for it. The certification program starts in 2 weeks. The book goes to print next month. My team is 7 people now. We just signed a partnership with a university to develop curriculum. None of that required his belief. It required mine. If someone finally apologizes after years of dismissing you, you're allowed to accept it without letting them back in. You're allowed to say thank you and keep walking. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. It means you've stopped letting their doubt occupy space in your strategy. The work continues, with or without their applause. The gala was 3 months later. I didn't plan it as a statement. My publisher suggested a launch event. Combine the book release with the certification cohort graduation. Invite the industry. Make it professional. Make it public. I said yes because it made strategic sense, not because I wanted to prove anything. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice the venue choice. Same hotel where I'd attended conferences as my father's guest. Same ballroom where I'd once sat at tables, quiet and observant, while he networked with senior partners. Same marble floors, different woman walking across them. The guest list was 400 people, industry leaders, academic partners, every client I'd worked with in the past 3 years, local media covering the business angle. My team wore matching pins with our logo. The certification graduates sat at reserved tables near the front. My publisher set up a book signing station with stacks of hardcovers, my name embossed in gold on the spine. My mother arrived 20 minutes after doors opened. I saw her before she saw me, navy suit, pearl earrings, the same purse she'd carried to my father's retirement dinner. She stood near the entrance, scanning the room like she was searching for someone familiar. My father wasn't with her. I wondered if he'd declined the invitation or if she'd come alone by choice. She spotted me across the room. Our eyes met. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just held my gaze for 3 full seconds before looking away. I was mid-conversation with a department chair from the university partnership. I finished the sentence I was on, excused myself, walked toward her with the same steady pace I'd used walking into that keynote. She was holding a champagne flute when I reached her. She said, "The invitation surprised me." I said, "It was a general industry mailing." "You're on several relevant lists," she said. "Still, I didn't expect you'd want me here." I said, "This isn't about what I want. It's about the work. You're welcome to stay or leave. Either way, the event continues." She looked past me at the banners. The book cover blown up 6 feet tall, the certification cohort name projected on the wall. She said, "You've really done it." I said, "Yes." She said, "Your father told me about the keynote. He said you were brilliant." I didn't ask why she hadn't come herself. I said, "He mentioned his apology." She said, "Did you accept it?" I said, "I acknowledged it." She took a sip from her glass, set it down on a nearby table. She said, "I know you think we didn't believe in you." I said, "I don't think that. I know that. You said it explicitly, multiple times." She said, "We were trying to protect you." I said, "From what? Success? Autonomy? Building something that mattered?" She didn't answer. I said, "Protection isn't conditional support. It's not warning someone their choices are reckless and then showing up when those choices pay off." She looked at the floor, looked back up. She said, "I'm proud of you." I waited. She said, I should have said it sooner. I should have believed you when you first told us what you were planning. I was scared you'd fail, and I let that fear speak louder than my faith in you." She paused. "I'm sorry." I could have told her it was too late. I could have listed every phone call she didn't return, every question she avoided when extended family asked about my work. I could have described the exact shape of loneliness that comes from succeeding without your mother's witness. I didn't. I said, "I appreciate you saying that." She looked like she wanted to reach for my hand, wanted to hug me, wanted to be invited to lunch, to a phone call, to a relationship that looked like before. I didn't offer it. I said, "The keynote starts in 10 minutes. You're welcome to stay." She said, I'd like that." I said, "First 3 rows are reserved. General seating is in the back." I walked away, took my place at the speaker's table. My team was already seated. My publisher gave me a thumbs up. The moderator tapped the microphone. The room quieted. I gave the speech I'd prepared. The origin story, the methodology, the data proving what I'd built worked. I thanked my team by name. I thanked the clients who trusted me when the framework was still theory. I thanked the certification graduates for choosing this path. I did not thank my parents. I did not mention family at all. Afterward, at the book signing, my mother stood in line. She waited her turn like everyone else. When she reached the table, she set down a copy of the book and said, "Could you sign this for me?" I said, "Of course." She said, "Maybe something personal?" I uncapped the pen, wrote, "To Mom, thank you for coming today. Love, Erica." I handed it back. She looked at the inscription, looked at me. She said, "Thank you." She said, Can we talk sometime? Maybe coffee?" I said, "I'll have my assistant check my calendar. If there's an opening, she'll reach out." My mother's face did something I couldn't quite read. She nodded. She said, "I understand." She took the book and walked away. The next person stepped up, a woman in her 40s holding 2 copies. She said, "One for me, one for my daughter. She's starting her own business next year. Your work gave her the courage." I signed both. The line continued for 90 minutes. By the time I finished, my hand was cramped and my water bottle was empty. My publisher found me in the green room. She said, "That was perfect. Exactly what we needed." She said, "The numbers are already coming in. Pre-orders spiked during your speech. We're looking at another print run before the month ends." I said, "Good." She said, "You deserve this. You built something real." I flew home the next morning, landed at noon, drove straight to my office instead of my apartment. My team had left notes on my desk, client feedback, certification applications, interview requests. I worked through them methodically. At 6 p.m., my assistant knocked. She said, "Your mother called, twice. She asked if you had time this week." I said, "What did you tell her?" She said, "That I'd check with you." I said, "Tell her I'm booked through the end of the month. Suggest mid-November." My assistant wrote it down. She said, "Anything else?" I said, "No, thank you." That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, scrolled through the conference photos the organizers had posted. There was one of me at the podium, mid-speech, gesturing toward the screen behind me. There was one of the book signing lines stretching out the door. There was one, taken from the back of the room, where you could see my parents sitting in the last row. My mother's face was turned toward the stage. My father's arms were crossed. I didn't post any of them. I closed the laptop, drank the wine, sat in the silence of my own space, the apartment I'd bought with my first year's profit, the furniture I'd chosen. Without anyone's input, the life I'd built one decision at a time. I thought about what my mother said. I should have believed you. I thought about what I didn't say. That belief offered after proof isn't belief. It's acknowledgement of a fact you can't ignore. That I didn't need her pride now. I'd needed it 7 years ago when I was drafting my first framework in a studio apartment with thrift store furniture. I'd needed it when I pitched my first client and didn't know if my voice sounded confident or desperate. I'd needed it when I hired my first team member and wondered if I was building something real or performing competence I didn't have. I didn't need it anymore. I had my own proof, my own team, my own evidence that I was exactly who I'd said I was. Here's what I learned about families like mine. They don't disown you out of cruelty. They do it out of fear. They see your choices as indictments of theirs. They see your success as proof they were wrong, and being wrong feels like failure, and failure feels unbearable. So they rewrite the story. They say they were protecting you. They say they always believed in you, just not in your methods. They show up when the risk is gone and the outcome is visible and claim they were there all along in spirit. And here's what I learned about vindication. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like exhaustion. It feels like standing in a room full of applause and knowing the people who should have clapped first are clapping last. It feels like your mother asking for coffee and you checking your calendar and realizing you don't owe her your time, just because she finally said sorry. If you've ever had to prove yourself to people who should have believed you from the beginning, drop a comment. Let me know your age, where you're watching from, if you ever got the apology or if you're still waiting. You're not alone. And if you're building something right now that your family doesn't understand, hear this. Their doubt is not your ceiling. Their fear is not your forecast. Build it anyway. Document everything. Keep the emails. Keep the texts. Keep the records of who showed up and who didn't. Not for revenge, for clarity. So that when they rewrite history, you have the receipts. I never did have coffee with my mother. My assistant relayed the November availability. My mother said she'd get back to us. She didn't. 3 months later, her assistant emailed mine. Subject line, reconnecting. The message was professional, polite. It suggested lunch at a restaurant I'd mentioned in a Forbes profile, proof she'd been reading about me even if she wasn't reading my messages. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit in my inbox for a week. I watched it exist there, unanswered, the same way my early emails to her had sat unanswered for years. I wasn't being petty. I was being deliberate. I was deciding if I wanted this, not if I owed it to her, if I wanted it for myself. I said yes eventually, not because I'd forgiven her, because I was curious. I wanted to see if she'd actually changed, or if she'd just gotten better at performing contrition now that my success was undeniable. I wanted to see if she understood the difference between saying sorry and being sorry, between acknowledging harm and actually doing the work to repair it. We met on a Thursday, 2:00. The restaurant was her choice again, always her choice, even when she was the one asking for the meeting. She arrived first. I saw her through the window before I walked in. She was checking her phone. Her posture was perfect. Her hair was the same controlled wave it had always been. She looked exactly like the woman who'd told me consulting wasn't a real career. She looked exactly like the woman who'd said I was gambling with my future. I walked in. She stood. We didn't hug. We shook hands like colleagues. I sat across from her and waited. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't fill the silence. I'd learned that silence was a tool, that people who owe you explanations will eventually speak just to escape the quiet. She started with small talk. The weather, the restaurant, my flight schedule. She'd seen on LinkedIn that I'd been in Singapore. I gave short answers. Yes, fine, productive. I didn't elaborate, I didn't perform interest, I didn't feel. After 10 minutes of this, she stopped. She put her menu down. She looked at me directly. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Do what?" I asked. "Talk to you, apologize to you, be your mother when I wasn't your mother when you needed one." I didn't respond. I waited. "I was wrong," she said. "About your business, about your choices, about you." She paused. Her hands were folded on the table. Her wedding ring caught the light. "I was afraid you'd fail and I wouldn't know how to help you, so I tried to stop you instead. I thought I was protecting you. I was protecting myself from watching you struggle. It was a good apology, specific, accountable, better than I'd expected. But here's what I noticed. She said I was wrong in past tense. She said I tried to stop you like it was a completed action. She didn't say, "I am sorry for the years you spent without me." She didn't say, "I am sorry I missed your wins because I was too proud to admit I'd misjudged you." She apologized for her reasoning, not for the outcome, not for what it cost me. "Thank you for saying that," I said. My voice was even, professional. The voice I used with clients who needed correction without humiliation. "I appreciate you acknowledging it." She waited. She wanted more. She wanted absolution, immediate reconciliation. The Hollywood ending where daughter forgives mother and they cry and hug and start over. I didn't give it to her. "I need time," I said. "I need to see if this," I gestured between us, "is something I actually want to rebuild or if it's just something you want me to want because it makes you feel better about the last 7 years. Her face tightened. Just slightly. Just enough that I saw the flash of the woman who'd once told me I was being dramatic when I called her out for missing my first keynote. "That's fair," she said, but her tone said it wasn't. We finished lunch. We talked about neutral things, industry trends, my upcoming Forbes feature, her book club. We split the check. We walked out together. She asked if we could do this again. I said maybe. I didn't commit. I didn't lie. I watched her drive away. I stood in the parking lot and felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not relief, not love, nothing. And that's when I realized the vindication was complete. I didn't need her to believe in me anymore. I didn't need her apology to feel whole. I'd spent 7 years building a life where her opinion was irrelevant, where her presence was optional, where her pride or lack of it didn't determine my worth. That's the part they don't tell you about cutting off toxic family. The goal isn't to make them sorry. The goal is to reach a place where their sorrow doesn't matter. I did that. I built that. And when she finally showed up, apologetic, accountable, wanting back in, I felt nothing. That's not cruelty. That's freedom. Here's what happened next. I didn't block her number. I didn't refuse future contact. I just stopped initiating, stopped wondering if she'd reach out, stopped checking her social media to see if she was watching mine. She texted every few weeks. Surface things. "Saw your company made the ink. 5,000 list. Congratulations. Hope you're doing well. Thinking of you." I responded when I felt like it. Sometimes that was same day. Sometimes that was never. I didn't owe her consistency. She didn't get the privilege of predictable access anymore. That privilege had been revoked the day she told me to get a real job while I was building something real. 6 months after that lunch, she invited me to Thanksgiving. Her house, her table, the same dining room where she'd once told me I was wasting my degree. I said no, not out of spite, not out of lingering anger. I said no because I had other plans. Plans with people who'd shown up when showing up mattered. Plans with my team who'd become my chosen family. Plans that didn't include performing forgiveness for someone else's comfort. She didn't push. She said she understood. She said maybe next year. I didn't correct her assumption that next year would be different. A year later, I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship summit in New York. Big stage. 3,000 attendees. Live streamed to another 15,000. The topic was resilience. Overcoming obstacles. Building something from nothing when the people closest to you don't believe it's possible. I didn't mention my mother by name. I didn't need to. I told the story in broad strokes. Family who dismissed the dream, years of silence, building anyway, succeeding anyway. The moment they came back wanting credit for a journey they'd refused to support. The crowd understood, because most of them had lived some version of it. After my talk, during the networking reception, a woman approached me. Mid-50s, tailored blazer, confident handshake. "I'm Margaret," she said. "I need to apologize." I didn't know her. She saw my confusion and continued. "My daughter started a business 3 years ago. I told her it was risky. I told her to wait. I told her she should focus on stability first." She paused. Her eyes were wet. "I heard your story and realized I'm doing to her what your mother did to you, and I don't want to be that person." I didn't hug her. I didn't cry. I looked her in the eye and said, "Then call her. Today, tell her you were wrong. Tell her you're proud. Don't wait 7 years to figure out what she already knows." She nodded. She thanked me. She left. I hope she called her daughter. I hope she said the things my mother never said. I hope that daughter got the apology she deserved, delivered in real time before the gap became too wide to cross. Here's the thing about toxic family dynamics. They teach you that your worth is conditional, that love comes with terms and conditions, that you have to earn the right to be believed in. And when you finally prove them wrong, when you succeed despite their doubt, you think vindication will feel like victory. It doesn't. It feels like grief. Grief for the years you could have had support and didn't. Grief for the version of the relationship that never existed and never will. Grief for the you that still wanted their approval even after you'd outgrown needing it. But after the grief comes something better. Clarity. The clarity to see that their inability to support you was never about your capacity. It was about theirs, their fear, their limitations, their inability to imagine a path they hadn't walked themselves. And once you see that, you stop taking it personally. You stop waiting for them to finally understand. You stop needing them to witness your wins in order for those wins to count. You just live, you build, you succeed. And if they show up wanting back in, you get to decide, on your terms, in your time, whether there's space for them in the life you built without them. My mother and I speak now, occasionally, on holidays, when she reaches out and I'm in the mood to respond. It's civil. It's surface level. It's nothing like what we had before the business, and nothing like what she wants us to have now, but it's what I'm willing to give. And that's enough. Because the relationship I have with myself, the one where I trust my instincts, honor my goals, protect my peace, that relationship is non-negotiable. Everything else is optional, even her, especially her. If you're watching this and you've ever had to defend,